emotional intelligence is the piece that blocks us in any part of our life.
This is such powerful work.
My partner and I had broken up, the unhealthiest, most depressed, disconnected from myself I'd ever been. And I remember laying in the bed looking up at the ceiling, it was like, what is happening? Men tend to connect over laughter, sports, business. What do women connect over? So many women are living in their head. So it's never really about the issue, right? It's never really about taking the bins out.
Never.
It's underneath. And a lot of women do this. I don't need a man. Those women are the ones that are always sitting home miserable.
What are some tips for men on areas to do the work to help better connect with their partner?
You have to first own the fact that you want a relationship, and that means letting those walls down.
This has been one of my favourite podcasts so far.
Like, I want your details. There's so many aha moments here going, oh my God, that's me.
And this is the biggest thing, right? People think when I get into a relationship, I'll finally feel love. And then what happens is...
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Unemployable, the fastest growing podcast in the country. We are self-proclaiming completely unregulated. Probably bullshit claim. But we are here with another episode, and today is going to be an absolute ripper. We have with us here in the studio, all the way from Newcastle, Nerida Bint. How are you, Nerida?
I'm really well and so honoured to be here. Thank you for having me.
We are very honoured to have you here. You are the first female guest on the Unemployable pod. You're in the wolf's den here. But
there is a lot of masculine energy in the room.
There is a big rooted up kangaroo behind you. Why should people tune in and listen to you today, Nerida? What are we going to get out of it with you? Because I know people are going to be anticipating what's to come. I know what we're going to talk about, but I'd love to hear it in your words. Like, why are we going to tune in? What are we going to learn today?
Yeah, well, just like you've touched on there, I'm the first female to come on this show. And, I'm not really anybody special. So one thing I'm really passionate about is helping women to really overcome their imposter syndrome, overcome their low self-worth and their fear of judgment of other women, and allow themselves to take up more space. We all know women, and men too, we all know women who have so much to contribute and offer the world. And, I think anybody listening to this podcast will be inspired by my story, whether it's for themselves or somebody that they know.
Awesome. I love that terminology. Allow yourself to take up more space.
That's awesome.
And this is, I think, for the men listening to this, you need to tune in as well, because this is what your woman is feeling in your life.
Yes.
And I can attest to this. And the reason I was excited to have you on is because I've been running training events, and as you know, for years, and we've had thousands of people in the audience. We've had lots of platforms to fill. Yeah. And the hardest spot to fill is getting a woman to step up and put herself in the spotlight. And it always fascinated me as to why it was, especially when I knew the woman's story. Despite having so much success in what they did, they were so hesitant to actually put themselves, and there was always two things that they said. Number one, they would say, I'm afraid of other women pulling me down. And it was never other men. It was always other women.
Yep.
And the other thing they said is, I don't feel qualified, suffering from imposter syndrome. But you've also got a great business story, which we're going to talk about both. So guys, stick around for this one. It is a little different to what we've done in the past, where we've had people with $1 million a year in ice baths and $15 million a year selling baby products. This is actually going to be more of a grassroots look at the psychology of success and personal growth and having a more fulfilled life, which from a feminine point of view, and you do this as a profession, right? As a coach now?
Yes. Yeah, so I'm an emotional intelligence coach. So I specifically work with women to help them understand emotional intelligence, because what I believe is that emotional intelligence is the piece that blocks us in any part of our life, whether it be in our leadership, whether it be in our relationship, whether it be in our parenting or our mental health. It's always that piece we don't understand around emotional intelligence. So my business, I've been in business for over a decade, but it started out in health and fitness. And then throughout the pandemic and throughout, that sort of challenging time and my own heartbreak, my own pain, that's what sort of transformed me to move me into where I am now.
Right. Well, we're going to dive into your heartbreak and your pain and what you've learned.
Yeah.
But before we do, I'm going to check in with the boys. Speaking of emotional intelligence, how are you, James?
Oh, I'm pretty low on that scale, Adam. I won't lie. And I'm still championing a bit above Eric, though, so I'm in good stead.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting pod today. I think we'll learn a lot as men listening.
I think so.
Mark, how are you, buddy?
Mate, I'm doing well. I've already got like 3 or 4 questions written down. You've pricked my ears up already, so
Great.
I'm looking forward to digging into it.
You've always said, Mark, that Dom was a big part of your success, right? And so it's interesting flipping into this kind of conversation.
Huge, and over the last 12 months, Dom has dedicated herself solely to our little one, and has sacrificed a lot of her personal development in this business space and whatnot. And so I'm really interested in asking a lot of questions on how we can be better support, like Adam touched on just before.
Yeah,
And
that's
create
great.
space for
And
women.
create space.
to step into and support them in that.
Yeah.
I love that. Can't wait.
All right, cool. You still got those tennis shorts on, bro. We've got a lady here.
How many pairs of the same colour do you have?
What's going on, buddy?
Yeah, these are
Just
last
eyes.
week.
I can't wait till winter comes. That's all
Eyes.
I'm going to say when he puts on some long pants
Over the
again.
table. Eyes over the table. All 4 of you.
Yeah, you can see what I'm looking at here, right? It's a,
And you can now say, we'll joke.
what's going on,
When are you
buddy?
going to start branding those shorts?
Start branding
It's going to be
everything.
merch. It's going to be merch. No, I'm excited. Obviously, I've been telling my wife, you're watching the podcast, make sure you watch every episode. I need you to support me. And she doesn't, she loves the podcast, but business just isn't her thing.
Yeah.
But this is going to be amazing because I think, she's right into what you're going to be talking about today.
Yeah. Right.
And excited for her to have a listen at this one for sure.
Well, let's jump in first about, I want to talk because your business journey, at least where we're going to pick it up today and where we picked up the conversation, it's kind of interlinked with what you teach now, how you got into that business. Maybe you could start there.
Yep.
How did you get into the business of gyms, which is where you were? Maybe you could tell us those seminal moments that were kind of formative for you and that journey, and then we'll sort of weave our way into how you've now gone into what you're doing now. Yeah. So let's start there.
Yep. So it would have been 2010. I had been overseas with my partner at the time, my first boyfriend, and we'd done the working visa holiday thing and living over there. I had always lived a very active lifestyle here and was always played a lot of sport. I was very focused on my health and fitness. But then I moved overseas and we were in this cold climate and I was eating terribly and just partying. So I put on about 25 kilos. And I came back like the unhealthiest, most depressed, disconnected from myself I'd ever been. I had a great time away.
Where were you? London?
I was in the UK.
Okay.
Yes. So did the whole rite of passage, go over for a few years, and I loved it. However, I came home and felt really lost, and I didn't know, I just felt lost. And we bought a house across the road from a CrossFit gym. And back then, no one knew what CrossFit was. It was such an early sort of brand. I remember we were literally across the road, so 20 meters. I remember watching these women lifting tires and, barbells above their heads, pull-ups and running. And I remember just thinking, oh my gosh, this is what I need to do to lose this weight. And so interestingly, most people I've come to learn, especially women, are so intimidated to walk into a gym the first time, but I wasn't because I'd always been an athlete. I was just out of shape. So I went over there naively straight away thinking, I just need to sign up. I was literally take my money. So I was looking for the owner, looking around, and it was sort of confusing. And I had this guy sort of approaching me, and I noticed he was really looking me up and down, and he was sort of very skeptical of me. And he sort of asked me who I was and what I was doing in there, and I said, oh, look, I've just bought a house across the road. I've never done gym training before, but I really need to lose some weight. I really want to get fit. How do I sign up? And he looked me up and down and he said, darling, this is not for you.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a defining moment for me. It was very humiliating and just mortifying. I was so shocked. And so I left that gym that day just feeling so sad that I couldn't be a part of that community. And I would still look out through the window and watch them training and just think, oh, I wish I could do that. And about 6 months later, I ran into a friend at a barbecue who'd lost about 15 kilos and he just looked amazing. He was really healthy and happy, and I said to him, what have you been doing? And he said, I've been doing CrossFit. And I was like, oh, damn it. Only elite people can do that. And he said, no, come with me to my gym. It's got a great community. Anyway, I felt sick. I was so anxious for days in the lead up, but I eventually went with him and I had the complete opposite experience. The owner met me at the front door, welcomed me, he knew my name, introduced me to a few people. The first workout we did was crazy. It was 5 rounds of 400-meter run, 20 box jumps, 20 wall balls, 20 burpees. So I'm like over 100 kilos. Like I was so unfit, but I had the mentality of like, I just need to start and just in 3 months' time, I'll get there. Anyway, everyone was finished way before I was, but my last round of burpees, I'll never forget. Everyone just dropped down and did another 20 burpees with me.
Wow. Goosebumps.
And it was like people counting down like 20, 19. And then everyone was high-fiving me. One lady hugged me. And I was just like, what is this? Like you just had no idea what it was. And so anyway, I was just hooked. So the owner said to me, what are your goals? And I was in tears saying, I really need to lose weight. Like I want to lose 20 kilos. So he said, come here 5 or 6 days a week, look after your nutrition, like get a coach. And weirdly, Michelle Bridges was doing a 12-week body transformation it was starting the week later. So I signed up to that, signed up to the gym, and I was a completely different person. Like I lost 25 kilos in the space of 12 weeks. But I was so confident and I was able to do things that I'd never done before. Yep. And I was a part of a community, and it was the first time. This is why being around like-minded people is so important. Prior to that, most of my friends and people I would associate with were drinking a lot, partying a lot. Everyone worked for the man, and all of a sudden I was spending time with people who had their own business, who would go for breakfast instead of dinner and drinks, who would catch up for coffee and just talk about going to workshops, and it was just like a whole new world for me. And so that was sort of the beginning of my health and building my confidence to leave the relationship that I was actually ultimately pretty depressed in. And then about a year later, I left my job, and it wasn't until I left my job and I had nothing, I just didn't know what I was going to do, that people kept saying to me, you should be a PT, you should be a PT. And so weirdly, I started running boot camps in the park. People loved it. Women just kept asking for more. And I would say to them, well, do you want to? And it was funny, right? Because I didn't have any gear. I wasn't a qualified PT.
Yeah. So I can imagine, I want to just unpack some
Sorry.
of the stuff before
Once
we
I
go
get
into
started,
the next journey. So you would have had an enormous amount of empathy as a PT,
Yes.
I can imagine.
Yes.
And you've got this vivacious personality, which we can see, which is awesome. But for somebody sitting at home right now or is on a train to a job they hate, living in a body that they despise, feeling flat, I just don't want to leave any of the keys that you just laid out on the table sitting there. So the big thing was you actually went and joined a community. And that's huge. That's why F45 blew up. Because have any of you guys done F45 or communal training? What's your experience?
I did CrossFit for 4 years and then F45 for about 2.5, 3 years. Mate owns 2 F45 gyms. So.
It's that community, right? It's that getting around other people that are eating well, exercising well, that normalize health and fitness.
Yes.
So if you're sitting there at home right now, 25, 30, whatever it is, over what you should be, I'm imagining your advice would be, don't lie to yourself. First of all, go and do something about it. And get started.
Yes.
And you said you got a nutrition coach as well.
Yeah.
So that's a whole other thing, right? It's you can't outrun a bad diet, as they say. So you got to exercise and diet. So it's a very powerful story.
But also with that, you're right. I remember going to a few different CrossFit boxes when I was trying to work out which ones. Some are super clicky and they're just arrogant assholes and they're just full athlete only, walking around jacked to the eyeballs, and they're not really conducive to someone coming in who's in a state of,
pull down the averages.
or just desperation and wanting to do something with their life. So it can be super clicky. I know that. But F45 is not as clicky. I think that's probably more standard to milk and sugar sort of exercise versus throwing a 10-ton around your head every day.
Yes, yeah.
The story that you told before actually gave me goosebumps when you said they got around you and started doing the burpees, because I had a similar experience. The first CrossFit gym I went to, I'm like, I'm not coming back here because they didn't really make you feel welcome. And the second one was so much like that, and it was changed my life as well. Just being around those type of people. That's awesome.
That. Well, what I've come to learn about CrossFit, but every business, is that culture flows from the top.
Yep.
So like when I started my women's only gym, I knew my 3 core values. One of them was community, excellence, courage. And we would talk about them, live them. And I had actual steps, and it always comes from the top, right? So if your owner of your CrossFit gym is more focused on performance and elite athletes, like those other athletes are not going to feel, well, they're not going to feel cared for. So I've spent 10 years in that industry, and to be honest, I love it, and I think what it's done for women is incredible. 15 years ago, you would never see women walking along the beach in their crop top and booty shorts. Like you've never seen women embrace their bodies as much as, CrossFit allowed them to, and weight training in general, which is amazing. Like women are now learning how to get strong, and they're learning how to focus. Yeah, they're learning how to, what I loved was the shift from the focus away from what you look like, and the focus is on what you can do, what your performance is. Because anyone can work hard, right? Anyone can train to perform. So I think that's what I loved about it. But yes, like very much when I started my own gym, I was very conscious of, I never want anyone to feel like that the way I felt.
I can imagine that was embedded. So let's pick up the story again.
Yep.
It's funny when we do our coaching, everyone gets a coaching box that we mail them. And when you lift the lid up, it says, become the source of what you seek, which is really what you did. You sort of became the source of a healthy body. That's what you were seeking. And now that you are that, it was kind of a natural segue, I imagine, into coaching and supporting others, which started with a park session and people coming down. And so how did you start that? You just, what, did you put a sign in the ground or?
So it was weird. Like I'm a big believer that sometimes other people reflect back to you what your brilliance is before you do. So when I quit my job, so I was driving to work one day and I had a really good job. Like I was on great money. I had freedom. I had a company car, phone, all of it. But I'd get the Sunday scaries every week. I just would dread it. And I remembered waking up one morning and on my way to work, I didn't even know what I was going to do, but I pulled over the side of the road. I called my boss and I was like, I am done. I just can't live like this anymore. And so anyway, he took me for lunch a few weeks later and he said, what are you going to do? And I said, I have no idea. And he said, you should be a PT. And I laughed at him. I laughed. And he said, Nerida, I've never seen anyone light up when they talk about burpees like you do. And then I just sort of took a few months off. And then a few months later, I was actually on my way down to the main sort of strip. And I thought, you know what, maybe I'll just waitress for a little bit. Like take the pressure off, just do something simple. And I happened to see this women-only supplement store, which I've driven past 1,000 times, but just, it's like I was seeing it for the first time. Went in there, met the owner, we got chatting, and she said to me, why don't you start a boot camp? And so it was all of a sudden all these people sort of saying, you'd be kind of good at that. And I was like, oh. She said to me, I've got some skipping ropes, I've got some slam balls, I've got a list of 10 girls' names that you could text. She said, you're not a qualified PT, but I'll come and help you. So all of a sudden I was just like lit up. So I went home, I texted these 10 girls, 8 of them showed up on Monday morning, 6 a.m., $10 cash. And it was just like a train after that. Like it was like I could not stop thinking about it. So that was sort of 3 months, 3 mornings a week. Then it was 5 mornings a week. Then it was morning and evenings. And it was funny because women were doing CrossFit, right? I had them doing CrossFit in the park. But if I asked them to come to a CrossFit gym, they were like, no way. Yeah. So that's when I started thinking, what would it be like if you had a CrossFit gym that wasn't really a CrossFit gym? So as soon as I started asking them, would you go to a women's only gym that was kind of CrossFit but not really? They were like, sign me up. And so then I had to overcome my own imposter syndrome, right? Because, I'm from housing commission, very poor family. I was not someone who was ever grew up thinking I would be a business owner or I would work for myself, never. So all of a sudden I'm trying to start a business. I'm like, how the hell do I even do that? And it was really weird. I just thought, you know what, one day at a time, just do one thing each day. And, I had a few friends that had mentors that sort of arranged for me to kind of connect with them and support me. And before you knew it, I had a little tiny warehouse space, 100 square meters. And I had this amazing open day. I opened the doors with 45 members and we got to 200 within 6 months. And I outgrew the space and had to move.
This is in Newcastle?
In Newcastle, yes.
So just chicks?
Just chicks, chicks. Women's only.
What was it called?
La Somme.
La Somme.
La Somme, yes.
So you started with 45 girls and then you grew from 45 girls to 200 girls that are coming in. And is it making money at that point?
Yeah, we were making good money. And we ended up opening a second site. We're about to open a third. But, it was a very profitable business. I had a team of 15 women, and passionate women, amazing women. We would host a huge fundraiser every year for a charity. We'd host events constantly. We had a podcast.
Really? What's the name? La Somme. What is
La
that?
Somme. It's the word means to be agile, supple, and graceful.
Wow.
Because I wanted something that was quite feminine. I didn't want it to be like a gym. I wanted it to be like a cult, a sort of I'm a La Somme girl.
Right. What's the opposite of La Somme? That's James, I think.
Let's lob. Did you say James?
I teed that up. It's an assist, and you slammed it down. It's just like Pippen and Jordan over here, mate.
I want
Gonna be a
to,
long
if I
day.
can, bring you back to what did you do for work when you were working
Yeah,
full
so I
time?
worked for an environmental services company.
Yeah.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, it was. Like, don't get me wrong. I loved the company. I loved
Yeah.
my boss. And even to this day, like, because we were featured in the paper and on the news. And to this day, he's my biggest supporter. Like, every time I've been featured, he would cut it out and put it up at the office.
Oh,
And
what a legend.
he'd invite me to their Christmas party every year. Like, I think he feels a sense of satisfaction that I ended up pursuing the thing that he could
Yeah.
see in me.
on
But yeah, I worked for Veolia Environmental Services. So
Okay.
give them a little plug.
And if you don't mind me asking, how much were you earning
At my
at
job.
that role?
Oh, I think I was on 100. I think it was just over 100K a year.
So 100K a year,
Yeah.
company car,
Yeah.
company phone,
Yeah.
fuel card.
Yeah. Freedom too. Could come and go as I pleased.
When did you quit?
It would have been October 20. We opened in 2014, 2013.
October
That's a long time.
2013.
October 2013.
So you left your 6-figure a year job
Yes. Yep.
to then set up a boot camp.
Yep. Well, I
And
didn't
your
work.
first boot camp,
Yep.
you made $80.
Yeah. Literally.
So-
yes.
Where did the belief come from?
Mm.
From the safety, the comfort zone of probably $150,000 a year package, including a car and fuel card and whatnot, to quitting and thinking that this was going to work. Where did that belief come from, especially coming from a housing commission, poor family?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just,
Well, it's funny because I don't know what it is. I've just always had this weird belief in myself, and it was just, you know what? I think what saved me was I didn't know what it was going to be. I was just following what felt good. Like, as soon as people started saying, "Hey, you'd be a good trainer," I was sort of like, "Okay, maybe I'll train some people." But I never once, and I think this is where so many people go wrong. They fear the experimentation phase. I just started coaching women, and then I loved it. I would leave every session beaming, and then I'd be thinking about it constantly until the next session. I wasn't thinking, wow, I want to start. If I had thought about what I created when I exited the business, like, there's no way I would have been overwhelmed. I would have been like, how the hell am I even going to get there? But it was that little bit of just one day at a time, and I just loved it so much I couldn't stop thinking about it. And then a few mentors, and this was weird for me because I was so lucky in the beginning to get a few mentors for free. Like, now when I look at these men, and they were men, right? I didn't have any women offering to help me. And I look at some of these men and what they're worth, and I think, wow, that guy sat with me at a cafe for 2 hours for nothing and then bought me lunch. Like, I just feel so lucky. Like, now I invest in mentors. Like, I get that. But back then, if it wasn't for those people sort of saying, hey, this has got some potential, you should chase this. But it was funny, right? I started to notice, like, I would tell friends about my idea. If I told 10 people my idea, 7 or 8 of them would say, it'll never work.
and those are probably your friends, right? Friends and family.
Yes.
Friends and family.
Too niched, too small a market, da-da-da. But then there'd be 2 or 3 that'd be like, that's a great idea. You should try and you should try that out. And then it took me a while to sort of piece it together. And I was like, these 7 people are all working for someone else. These 2 or 3 people are entrepreneurs working for themselves. Like, they're projecting back to me their own belief.
It's interesting because
the
there's so many
age-old
people.
quotes.
Yeah, there's so many people that would be listening right now, right? That are at that cusp of wanting to quit a job, but they just not backing themselves.
Yeah.
So that mentorship and
Yeah. Well,
not being fearful of experimenting, that's interesting.
I remember someone saying to me, and I'll never forget it. He said, Nerida, there's nothing more addictive than a heroin and a monthly salary. And I remember that hit me, and I was like, oh my God. Like, and that for me, I was like, I have to make this work. There was just no other way.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you've gone into business, then what happened? Like, something happened in the world, right, that shut that down, and that was Rona came along.
Yep.
And basically, I actually owned a building with gym tenants in it.
Yeah.
And that just actually 2 female owners that were it's called the Strength Collective, and they were lovely girls, really hardworking, but the business just went away overnight. That is what I assume happened to you. You had a nuclear event, basically.
Yeah, so we had, opened up a second site in Maitland, which is probably 30 minutes away from Newcastle, Hunter Valley, huge space, amazing location. We were about to sign a lease on a third in Lake Macquarie. I had people coming from Sydney talking about investing into the business. I was really like, I'm going to take this national. I was very excited. And then we heard whispers, December 2019. All of a sudden, gyms were getting closed in America in January 2020. I had a partner at the time, and he'd come in on the business with me. And it was weird. All of a sudden, March 2020, overnight, on the news, businesses cannot reopen tomorrow morning. Literally a few days prior, my partner and I had broken up. I was living in an Airbnb, and I remember laying in the bed looking up at the ceiling. Just literally 3 months prior, my life was on a completely different trajectory. I was talking to my partner about getting married and having kids, and the business was going to take off. And all of a sudden, it was like, what is happening? And, I've been through moments like this before, which I now call a divine storm, where everything sort of stormy happens at once. And I do believe it's happening for you, but it's hard to see at the time, right? So I remember telling myself that, even though I was in so much pain, I was in so much heartbreak, and I felt so alone. I was newly single in a lockdown, living in an apartment by myself,
Awesome.
Nursing a heartbreak. Yeah. No one could see me because of, this thing. So
You can't even go out and date.
exactly. Can't, not even that I wanted to.
No,
but
I know, but
yeah.
it's just nuclear winter, right? So that all happens.
That happens. Yep.
You're broken up. Your business goes away.
Yep.
You're sitting in an apartment.
Yeah.
Locked down, probably partially. And so, what led you from there to being where you are today as a coach? How would you describe? I mean, sort of a life coach.
I'm an emotional intelligence coach.
Emotional intelligence coach. Women only or men too?
I do coach some men, but my programs are designed for women.
Mostly. So,
but I do
so
coach men privately.
Yeah. So what's the journey from there?
Yeah.
You've lost your business. What happened with, just on that, what happened with your leases? Did you get out of your leases? What happened?
Yeah, no, luckily I was able to, sort of manage to keep the business going. So it was such a crazy time. I'd gone through this breakup. I was living by myself. I had a community of 500 women, 15 staff looking to me constantly, what's happening? Every week we'd get messages, when are we reopening again? It was just such a crazy time. One of my landlords who I had a great relationship with came and just had this great heart-to-heart convo, and he said to me, look, we'll go 50-50. The other landlord was like, no, you need to pay 100%. I think he waived a few small fees for me, and that was my biggest lease. So that really broke me. It was financially really challenging to sort of keep that. But I managed to keep the community together and sort of moving forward for the next 2 years. But it wasn't like any business, right, where you reopen the doors and everyone just comes back. We had restriction. We were open, close, masks.
All that social distancing.
Masks.
Seems like a dream, but it was all there, right?
Yeah, it was there was always a restriction. And then when we'd reopen, it would take people months to come back in. So it was I remember figuring out over the 24 months of that period, we were closed for 8 months of that time. So that's a long time to be completely closed, not bringing any money in.
So what did you do with it?
Yeah, so weirdly, I was able to sell the business. So I remember saying to my my accountant at the time, I was going to close, and she said, why don't you try and sell the business? And I remember thinking, who would buy gym after the pandemic? But it turned out people were keen. So I found a buyer. She was a good friend of mine. The process was, fairly streamlined. So that was great. And it was weird because throughout that time, that's when I'd been really nursing this heartache and this pain. And that's when I, for the first time, really looked at myself, and I was sort of like, what is it about me with this relationship piece? Why can't, I've always dreamed of having a partner and feeling really connected and really emotionally a part of a family, because I hadn't really had that growing up. I had a lot of loneliness, sadness, a lot of neglect, I was left alone a lot. So I'd always craved that. So I was sort of just looking at myself and really, sort of trying to unpack it. And it was funny. My partner said to me when we broke up, I remember him saying to me, Nerida, I just feel like I'm not good enough for you. And I thought at the time what he was saying was, I feel like you're too good for me. Very different. I remember about 6 months later, I was with some friends, and we were just having a bit of a chat, and I asked him, and I said, what is it about your wife that made you want to propose to her? because he had been a bit of a ladies' man. You know, he'd dated a lot of women. And he finally settled down. He was so happy. And he said to me, Nez, Soph's the first woman I ever met that I knew was too good for me but never made me feel like that.
Wow.
And for me, in that moment, it was just like this epiphany. Like I was like, oh my God, all these moments of me criticizing my partner, complaining to him, nitpicking, nagging, controlling, directing him. I was like, oh my God, like far out. That's me. Like that's no wonder. I understood what he was saying for the first time. And so that's when I started. You know what was really funny? I remember Googling through that first lockdown. Like I read every book I could. I listened to every podcast. I was trying to do whatever I can to feel better. And I remember Googling on Google, like I remember searching, what is it that men look for in a wife? I know. And I used to think it was looks and it was, you know, like all these other things, right? And the one thing that kept coming up was emotional connection. And I didn't even know what that meant.
Can you give us an insight? Because this is getting interesting around this stuff, because as men particularly, we only see it from our side and women only see it from their side.
Yeah.
So you said it all came flooding back, right?
Yeah.
I know in my life there are things that I've said and things that I've done that when those memories come flooding back, I'm horrified. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, make it stop. That actually happened and I actually did those things.
Yeah.
So there's no shame in that. Everybody's got those moments.
Yeah.
What were some of the things specifically that came flooding back? What were some of the real life examples of you not being your best self in hindsight?
Yes,
in a relationship context.
Yes. Well, all these moments of me trying to like direct him and boss him around and control him, and ways that I was like complaining to him around, I really wanted to get married and we'd been together 3 years. And I remember an ad popping up for like engagement rings at some point. And I remember that sending me into a bit of a tizzy. But instead of me actually just vulnerably sharing with him like, hey, I'm really noticing like I keep thinking about this and it's making me feel really scared. Like you haven't brought this up, and like, what do you see for your future? Like, what do you see for me? Like, does this feel like a good, connection for you? No, I didn't do that. I would just project onto him. I would be like, you're probably never going to ask me to marry you, are you? You don't really want kids, do you? You don't even think about our future, do you? Like I was just nitpicking and projecting and pointing the finger, right?
And like, I just might interject here, men here, how does that make you feel when it's said sort of almost in that passive aggressive accusatory
Yeah, exactly
way?
as you said, passive aggressive and accusatory, and all you want to do is leave. And also in reverse, I've done the same as well, and the result's not what you want. You want them to come in close, but really it's just like a massive repellent. Bit like
and men do it too, of course, in other ways. But you go with this sort of preloaded question that does sort of push. So that's one example around the getting married piece. How else might that show up when you said that you sort of pushy, and what other examples?
So one thing I see a lot of women do, that I did a lot, was direct him, like the biggest thing I used to do was tell him how to drive a car.
Yeah, that's going to go over well.
But do you know how many women do this every single day?
Yeah. She tries.
Yes.
She tries.
Yes. I see so many women, like not trusting like that their man will get them there safe, and they have to direct and control. I would do this constantly with him, and I didn't even realize how infuriating it was. And I used to sit there, and do you know what it was? Now looking back, I wasn't even really aware of it at the time, but deep down I had a judgment of him. Deep down I would judge him in my mind and think, he wasn't good enough. Like he wasn't driving well enough. He wasn't doing this. He wasn't doing that. It was constant judgment. And so obviously that he picked up on that.
So when he was saying, I feel like I'm not good enough for you, he wasn't saying, I don't think I'm good. What he's saying is, in your world, because you know best, I'm never going to be good enough for you. That's the nuance that you're pointing.
100%.
Yeah.
And he interpreted that in those kinds of dialogues where instead of sitting down and say, honey, like, I really love you and I really see a future with you. I really want to have kids. How are you feeling? Like that as a man, if a woman said it to me like that, that's a conversation I would lean into and want to engage with. But the other way around, I'm like,
makes you want to do nothing but run.
Oh, of course. Makes so much sense. Like now looking back, because I was so scared and I was so in my head about, projecting all of my pain onto him, because deep down I was actually really disconnected from myself. And it was, and this is the biggest thing, right? People think when I get into a relationship, I'll finally feel loved. And then what happens is, because I had my emotional home, we all have an emotional home, right? They're the 3 to 5 emotions that you felt most between 0 and 7. And so for me, I had a lot of shame, loneliness, sadness, rejection, and confusion. So my partner and I dated for like a year or 2, and it was all honeymoon fun. Like he was distracting me from that emotional home that I had my whole life, right? For a little bit of time, I was sort of forgetting about it. All of a sudden we move in together, we settle into the relationship, that emotional home pops up. So really it was actually me that I had to deal with. I had to actually do the work to sort of recognize, wow, you've still got this huge disconnect within yourself that you need to heal. But we don't do that, right? What happens is we point our finger at the other person, or we get the job, or we do the business, we make the money, we go on the holiday, we think, I'll finally feel this when this happens. And then we go, and there's that great saying, right? Everywhere you go, there you are. Yeah.
So good.
So this emotional home concept can be quite confusing, I think, for some people, because when I think of home, I think of a safe, supportive, tonic, a good thing for me. But sometimes it's not a good thing for you if you grew up with damage.
Well, that's
and so many people, like I watch maths occasionally. I'm going to admit to it. And I love that show because I'm like, I'm never leaving my wife. My relationship is the best because you see these complete fuck ups on national TV. But, I don't mean necessarily people. We see these people, I'm sure the producers match them for drama. Like, let's put these two together. Let's like gasoline and matches, right? Yeah. So this emotional home can actually be quite negative. And what you're saying is, Mark, you seem to be resonating with this, but maybe one of you could sort of talk about what is an example of an emotional home that's really negative and how does it form?
Yeah. So your emotional home is whatever emotions you felt most dominant in your first 0 to 7 years of life.
So if your parents broke up, you could feel abandoned or you could.
Yes. Yeah. Or so if you grow up in a home, this is why I'm so passionate about this work, because if you grow up in a home with 2 parents who love you, create safety for you, are emotionally attuned to you, and don't reject you whenever you have an emotion. Anger is a big one, right? Especially in boys. A lot of parents struggle when children express anger and reject them. We are literally looking, like every single day, we're looking to be loved and accepted and safe, right? So if I express anger and love's taken away, like mum goes into another room, I'll start to learn that emotion's not good. So I'll suppress it, right? But it doesn't go anywhere. I just start to have a different relationship with it. So the emotions that you felt most growing up, they will be your predominant ones. And so it's interesting, right? These will pop up in every part of your life. So whether it's your relationship or business or friendships or mental health, whatever it is.
They're your defensiveness triggers.
Yes. Yep. It's whenever you feel stuck, it's always the same. Every time I sit with someone and they're having an issue, I'll say, how do you feel? And women especially always go into the head. They always go, well, I just feel that he shouldn't be, it's like, no, that's not an emotion. How do you feel? Oh, I feel scared. I feel angry. I feel hurt. Okay. And then you look at you ask them about another instance in their life. Like, okay, how did that make you feel? It's the same emotions. How did that make you feel? Same emotions. So what I'd love you guys to do, think about this, right? And I've got an emotional wheel here if you want to have a look at it. I happen to bring it with me. But if you were to look at the main, like you look at the wheel, right? That's an emotional wheel. So that's a tool that we use to help people connect to their emotional home. And you'll see that in the middle, there's the primary emotions and then there's the secondary that flow out from that. Now, some of them are, and I don't like to use the word positive or negative. They just are, right? Obviously, human beings tend to feel lighter when they experience more of those lighter emotions such as joy, happiness, contentment, peace. But emotions are really just data and directives. Like sometimes anger is healthy because it means a boundary's being crossed or a need's not being met. Sometimes anger is healthy because someone's being hurt and you need to stand up and defend them. Like, you know what I mean?
This is great.
Sometimes sadness is positive. It means you need more connection. For me, I'm a big believer that, a lot of people suffer from anxiety and depression because their emotional home, anxiety comes from fear, depression comes from sadness.
So what was wrong with your emotional home that led you to being an annoying partner?
Yeah, well, it was just that those deeper emotions of sadness, shame, and loneliness that kept bubbling up for me to look at, and but yet when it would come up, because I didn't have the awareness to look at it, and tune in and sort of be like, wow, I feel really sad, I feel really lonely, I feel really scared, I feel confused. Because I didn't have that piece, I would project, I would point the finger at him because he was the closest thing to me, right?
Right.
So we always do this. If we don't have an emotional intelligence within us, when we feel an uncomfortable emotion, we just want to go, bleh. Children do this all the time, right?
So this is why emotional intelligence is the intervention between what you feel and how you express what you feel.
Yes.
And that's the emotional
Yes.
intelligence piece that you work with.
Yes.
And so how did you end up with that shitty emotional home?
Well, when I think about it, right, I think about all of those, like my relationship with my father was traumatic. Like, you know, we've made peace now, but I was raised in a home with 3 children. We were very poor. I was the eldest, and I was actually not my father's daughter. But I didn't know this until much later in life. And so I think he had a really traumatic childhood too, and he felt like the black sheep in his childhood. My parents were actually hearing impaired. So my father was one of 3, and he was sort of sent to boarding school quite young. So I think he felt like the black sheep, right? But he used to project that onto me. I think deep down he resented that he was providing for a child that wasn't his. And so he would reject me from the family. Like
So
he
that's
would
where the
ostracize-
shame came from in your emotional home.
He would speak to me with disgust over and over and over. He would isolate me from the rest of the family. I remember us sitting there watching a movie one night, like a family movie, and I remember feeling so happy, and he just took one look at me and like, off to your room, off you go. So I was constantly ostracized and shamed and told I was bad. So it makes so much sense. Like I didn't have a strong sense of self. It makes so much sense that I didn't have self-worth or confidence or, you know, all those things, right? And this is why I am so passionate about this work. The way you feel as an adult always makes sense. It's always from childhood, those first 7 years. And we all deserve a childhood where we're loved and kept safe and we're cherished and we're listened to and understood. But the reality is so many of us don't get that. And I'm much better, since doing this work on myself, like I think about who I was before that, like how I would project my pain everywhere, not just on my relationship, but at work, friendships, everything. I was not an emotionally safe person. So I was causing a lot of
Can you
chaos.
give us some examples of how you would express that in the real world outside of a relationship?
So many.
Can you give us an example of that? And then when you became aware of this concept, you go, oh shit, I was abandoned as a child, because I know a lot of, like, my wife won't mind me saying she had a very tumultuous relationship with her father as well, violence, the whole thing. Somebody listening to that, how do they intervene once they realize that is their emotional home? So some examples of how it showed up in a relationship and in the real world. And then if you come to that realization that you've had some shit go down in your childhood that's maybe giving you a negative place, how do you intervene and go, right, I'm no longer going to be that person? How do you do that?
Yeah, so some of the ways that I used to, like now looking back, if I felt angry, like I remember so many staff meetings, you know, I would be triggered in a staff meeting and I had no filter, no pause, no ability to sort of regulate. So I would project that out onto my team, you know. I remember.
So what would happen? Give me an example of a trigger. Somebody would say something that would set you off.
Yes.
So what would they say and what would be the feeling?
Well, someone might say something around, questioning something that I would bring to the meeting, right? So I might say something like, God, I can't remember specific examples, but I remember in meetings, someone might bring something up like, hey, we haven't really thought about this. What do you think? Like it might be getting new gear, or it might be.
And that you would sort of interpret that to mean.
I wasn't doing a good job.
You weren't doing a good job.
Yes.
You're being abandoned or shamed in front of other people.
Shame was a big emotion that I could not tolerate. So, and it is a very painful emotion, right? Because it takes you straight back to childhood. So, I remember so many moments. And so there's something called reparenting. Have you heard of that? So it's where you literally go back to all those moments as a child where you were treated in a way that, was painful. You go back and you replay and revise the memory in your mind and you show up as the adult that you needed, right? So shame for me was such a painful emotion. Like the minute anyone would question anything, it would just be like, I remember like my whole face would go red, my heart would be pounding.
Yeah.
You know, I remember a moment actually about only a year ago, not that long ago. We were up here visiting. I was on a girls' trip and we were getting into a car and we were driving and I was sort of in the back seat and I was sort of jumping out to like press the button to get in and out of our Airbnb to open the gate. So anyway, something happened and I just didn't put my seatbelt back on. And we're driving along and someone noticed that I wasn't wearing my seatbelt. And the girl driving the car like got quite angry at me. Like she had gotten a brand new car for her job. She only had a few points. Like she was quite, you know, upset that I was not wearing my seatbelt because it meant she could get in trouble. So I remember when she sort of like had a go at me, like feeling this immense shame. And it was the first time I really remember like feeling it and sort of like normally I would bite back and I would have gone into this big thing. And I remember like saying to myself, like, okay, like you feel shame right now. That's okay. Like that makes sense. I had to say to myself, you've just made a mistake. You're not a bad person. You just made a mistake. And I wound down the window and I was like about to in tears and I just felt the wind on my face and I was just looking at the trees and I was just like really, really regulating that emotion, like trying to just breathe so that I didn't react. And it was like afterwards, like I still felt really bad. Like I felt yuck for a little while. One of my friends cracked a joke and she gave me a little squeeze and she was like, it's okay. Like, but in that moment, like if you've grown up with a traumatic childhood, like you don't go into, I just made a mistake, I did something wrong. You go into, I am a mistake, I am something wrong.
Right.
And so
you're
like
basically feeling the emotion and then you're going, oh, I've done this emotional intelligence training. I can intervene here and I can calm down.
Yeah. It's actually the act of being with your emotions in a loving way, like in an empathetic way, like you would a child.
Yeah. So when you're in a relationship, when you're driving along with your man and he's driving a certain way and you catch yourself, you kind of surrender.
Yes.
And I know for me, is that right?
Well, you sit there and the biggest thing you can ask yourself is, why am I having such a reaction to him not driving the way that I want him to drive?
It's understandable if he's being a complete dickhead and putting you at danger or whatever.
Oh, yeah, but that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you're talking about just like this compulsion.
Just, you know, I remember once we were running a bit late for something and I would normally like, you know, put the foot on the pedal and sort of, he was driving appropriate, but I would just be in my head like, oh, I was so angry at him. And really I'm angry at myself because I'm late for the meeting. But because I can't tolerate that, I'm projecting onto him. So I think the best thing you can do is always ask yourself, like, what is coming up in me and why am I feeling like this? What is going on for me?
And going back and it was explained to us, Dom and I are doing a parenting transformation journey.
So
and
good.
The lady's a clinical psychologist who's kind of de-licensed and now is just working with private clients.
Yep.
And she explains it like, when Dom's being mean or being bitchy or whatever, or when Mark's being frustrated or he's not being present, that's got nothing to do with him or it's got nothing to do with her. It's what's going on within you.
Yes.
And it's the trigger is what you were lacking as a child.
Yes.
And that's making you want to respond. She said, in those moments when you're being triggered, go away and look after your 5-year-old or your 7-year-old or your 9-year-old self and give them what they needed,
Reparent.
which is kind of what you're explaining what you did in the car. You're giving that younger version of yourself what they needed that they didn't get.
Because there's
it's so powerful.
There's a great quote. If it's hysterical, it's historical.
Yeah.
So like think about it. Whenever you've had a big reaction, it's never really been about the thing at the time. There's always something else going on.
Yeah.
It's reminding you of something else.
You were talking about in the pre-interview when I was changing you that parents do one of three things. They turn to you, away from you. Can you explain that concept?
Yeah, so one of the big things that I build a lot of my parenting work on and relationship work is the Gottman theory of bids for connection. So every single day we are bidding to connect with people, right? You know, you might make like these little jokes that you guys have been making, right? And so it might just be like, hey, I read this book the other day, or hey, I went to the shops today, or whatever it is, right? So you're bidding for someone's connection. So often kids are doing this constantly, right? They're like, mummy, watch me do this, watch me do that, come with me here, come with me there. Like they're constant. Now, in order for a relationship to thrive, we need to be, we can turn, the way that we respond to these bids is one of three ways. We either turn towards, which is we lean in, we connect, we emotionally sort of like, you know, you making this joke earlier, like he turns around, looks you in the eye, laughs. That's him turning towards. Then there's turning away, which is sort of like, oh yeah, cool, like, but not really engaging. It's like acknowledgement, but not engage. And then there's turn against, which is like shame or like don't have time for that, or they literally don't engage at all, or they might demonize you. Like
it's negative. Yeah.
Yes. And so in order for a relationship to thrive, we need to be turning towards each other 80% of the time. And what we're not doing, especially in parenting, is we're not understanding that our kids are bidding for our connection constantly, and our devices, technology, our stress, our load every single day is depleting us to the point where we're unable to engage. Now, I get a lot of pushback from parents because they're like, but, you know, even going to daycare and stuff, like, and people push back and they're like, but what other option is there? And it's like, I don't have the answers. That's up to you. You as a parent have to decide. Like, if you both want to go to work and you want to send your kids to daycare 5 days a week and you're not with them from the age of 2 or 3, like, that's okay. That's on you. That's your decision. But just don't lie to yourself about the outcome.
Yeah.
Because what we need to do is we need to build relationships with our children. There's 2 types of relationships. There's connected and then there's obligatory. So obligatory means like I still love my parents, but I don't really I don't find myself wanting to go and see them, and I feel myself holding things back from them. I can't really be my true self. Like it's sort of like you know what it's like I'm a bit like this with my parents, right? But then there's connected, where it's like I love my parents, I want to see them, I know they're there for me. I really genuinely cherish that relationship. Now, what a lot of parents don't understand is you're responsible for creating that from 0 to 18. So if you have it as an adult, an obligatory relationship, like if you're a parent and you're frustrated at your relationship with your child, that's your responsibility. Like that's you not learning how to emotionally attune and be there for your kids. You maybe haven't spent the time. You maybe haven't been present.
All of this transfers to adult relationships too, though.
100%.
Especially as entrepreneurs, because I've jokingly referred to entrepreneurship as a cancer many times.
Yeah.
And people go, oh, that's funny. I'm like, no, I'm not even kidding right now. Like it is. This shit eats into your life, can eat your relationships, because you get home and your wife or partner is trying to engage with you and connect. And you're just like, yeah, okay, let me just check this email, or, you know, some people go for the drink and that's their distraction. But, you know, I got to a similar point with you where I got to my 40s and found myself single and had to ask some very, very hard questions about, I've got money. I'm not the most handsome guy in the room, but I'm not a complete train wreck, you know. I'm reasonably successful looking from the outside. I mean, holding jokes for a minute.
I'm just you're judging self-assessment, but sure, you're judging yourself,
But you know, why am I here at 40? It's sort of it's getting a bit old to be sort of like playing the field for me. You know, I wanted to find my person. What's going on there? Why is that the reality? And so I had some of those self-assessment moments of really sitting there and thinking about what it was. And my point was that business had become a relationship that was invading, and my obsession, my ambition was not enabling me to be there and show up and as committed to a relationship and surrender fully to a relationship and turn towards my partner when business was always demanding and always being prioritized.
Yeah.
And so I think these are really good things, not just for relationships with kids, but for entrepreneurs listening to this and going, how often are you either neutral or turning away from your partner? Because let's face the divorce facts for a moment. Like it is a risky bet to go and marry these days, especially if you have money, because you're likely to lose half of it because you aren't emotionally intelligent and you haven't dealt with these things. So it's very, very important work. And I found this relationship I'm in now has been working so beautifully because I'm at a point where I've had enough pain and loneliness. And you get to that point where you go, I want to learn this stuff. I want to actually look at me in the mirror. What am I doing wrong? And that is such a pivotal turning point for anybody listening to this who still finds themselves single. You've got to slow down and realize maybe it's you.
So at this point, you've gone, you're two CrossFits, a potential third, pulling at probably about 1.8 mil a year. If CrossFit used to be $70 and 500 members, and it's a pretty good business. You've gone through, you've sold it, and then you've gone on a completely different journey. And obviously, you're very educated in the space. What was the learnings? Where'd you go and find this source of intelligence to be able to then sit here today and unravel it all for us?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I get a lot of people asking me that and asking me what qualification did I go and do, and they want to sort of follow suit. But to be honest, it's completely self-taught. It is. I read a book a week. I listen to maybe 2 or 3 podcasts a day. I am so like enmeshed in this content and this sort of space that I just gobble it up. So I'm in the process of building out, a certification or an accreditation sort of coaching business for myself, because I do feel one thing that I think really, one of the reasons why this is resonating so much is because I'm sharing so much of my own personal journey, right? Like I'm not, I have been in therapy for 15 years, but for 10 years, it was constant just diagnosis. You've got depression. Like it's just a complete, like that's the explanation. And I would just get so frustrated that I never felt like I was talking to a person, like a human being. And I think my life completely changed when I started spending time with coaches who were sort of talking in a way where they were like sharing some of their own pain and their own journey and their own mistakes. I would sort of start to understand, there's not something wrong with me. I've just had a bit of a rough start in life. So I think for me, one thing I really want to change about this landscape is bringing more of the human being in. Like if you're a coach, a mentor, a therapist, whatever it is, bringing more of your own self into like empathy, like validation into that space so that people, because shame is like, it's a very painful emotion when you feel it alone. So it needs to be healed through empathy and understanding.
What are women struggling with the most through your work? What are they struggling with the most? What's caused them the most damage? And what are they doing wrong?
I think there are 2 things that I constantly hear women come to me. And the first piece around business is the low confidence, low self-worth, not charging what they're worth, fear of criticism and judgment, which I know where this comes from, right? Like it's really interesting. I've just sat here for an hour, listened to you guys, the banter that you have, right? Men tend to connect over laughter, sports, business, that sort of thing. So that's why you'll never fear judgment from a man. Women don't tend to connect that way. What do women connect over? Gossip. That's right. Women tend to connect in a different way, unless you're in a different realm of women, which is where I am now, where we talk about big
ideas.
Things. Yeah, we talk about
the old saying, small minds talk about people and big minds talk about ideas.
Yes.
Not to make that a sexist statement, but it's just a general statement.
But it's just worth recognizing that a lot of women do connect that way. So it makes so much sense that transfers into the business. And I also will say that I think men tend to go into business. We can't ignore masculine and feminine energies and dynamic. Like we are at our core, like those energies. I'm typically actually more feminine. You guys are more masculine. And so what happens is men tend to grow up and they tend to want to seek to become providers and protectors. We have to honor that, right? It's beautiful. They want to nurture, they want to like be able to provide and create safety for their family. Whereas I don't think women tend to naturally grow up seeking that. I think what typically, and this is I will say there might be the exception, women tend to fall into business via accident because what they're actually trying to do is they want to help.
Yeah,
they
through
actually
empathy.
Yes, it's not really about business. It's more about, they figure out that there's something that someone needs to be helped or a group of people or there's like a missing piece and they want to contribute, they want to support. So I think that's why women have this huge imposter syndrome because, and then, it's that gossip piece around, I fear judgment from other women. And so I think they suffer from low self-worth and then I think they struggle being in their masculine energy in relationships and they are unhappy and disconnected from themselves and that portrays into their relationship.
What do you mean? Like, again, how does that show up when they struggle with their masculine energy in a relationship?
They are controlling, directing, trying to change their partner.
Because I see a lot of women in business that do struggle with that. They're like, I can't find a dude. There's no dude that wants to date me. And I see these beautiful girls that have got cash, but they cannot get a dude.
Yeah.
And they all say the same thing. Men are intimidated by my success. And
Yes.
that is that true in your opinion?
Well, are you guys intimidated by me? Like,
No.
exactly. This is a
love it.
projection. Again, it's another way of pointing the finger. It's another way of avoiding looking at yourself and sort of going, and if men are intimidated by me, there's a great quote I heard once. You're not intimidated. It's better to ask, instead of saying someone's intimidating, actually put the onus on, you might be intimidated. So I think what happens there is women might think that men are intimidated by them, but is it their success or is it their dominant way of showing up? Is it their way of, because I see a lot of women, especially successful women, that think that success is tied to their self-worth. They come in and they sell themselves, and it's like, that's not what a man is going to want to fall in love with you. Like, a man is going to want to see your heart and want to know that he has a space in your life to provide and to take care of you. Like, if you're cutting him out from the get-go saying, and you know, a lot of women do this, I don't need a man. I can buy myself flowers. Cool. Those women are the ones that are always sitting at home miserable buying their own flowers. Like, you have to first own the fact that you want a relationship, and that means letting those walls down. I think that really comes from pain because it's projection. It's like the minute you're pointing the finger, there are three pointing back at you.
Yeah.
So it's like the minute you're assuming anything of anyone, you're immediately absolving yourself of any responsibility. And so therefore you're never empowered to change. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're saying face the fact that there are male and female energies,
Yes.
and they need to be honoured.
And there
In
is,
your opinion,
there are so many men out there. Like, there are so many men that want to get married, have children. Like, I believe we all want that one person, that partner. We all want to be seen, loved, accepted, and valued for who we are. It's a human desire to want to have that intimacy, right? And I think what happens is most people have a fear of intimacy.
yeah.
And that's what a lot of women have, right?
And I would see that, you know, just sticking on come back to the fear of intimacy, because I think that's a really important discussion as well. But I know as a guy, even if there is a girl watching this that has lots of money and is successful, I'm telling you right now, that dude doesn't want you buying his dinner. And these days it's like, oh, you sexist pig, you know, blah, blah, blah. Just you're a bigot or whatever the wording is. I don't give a shit. But I'm not letting a girl buy a dinner. Like, I want to buy my wife dinner, right? Get your shit together and pay for that girl. You know what I mean? When I was in Italy not that long ago, we went to a restaurant and there was no prices on the menu for her. And she was like, she's like, honey, like, I don't know what to order because there's no prices. And the waiter says, a woman as beautiful as you never pay in a restaurant like this.
I love
and like,
that.
it's so politically incorrect. And I was like, fuck yeah, I love this joint. Like, because I got to feel the man. And she was like, I'm just going to surrender. And, you know, that's when I think, at least for me, you have that, like Tony Robbins talks about it, you know, men don't know how to be men anymore and women are struggling to be women. So we're meeting somewhere in the middle and there's no spark.
Yeah,
No polarity.
You need
No
the
polarity.
polarity.
Yeah. Exactly.
And not every woman, but a lot of women want to be swept off her feet. They want a man who's going to take them and look after them. And the man is wanting to do that. And it drives me fucking nuts when I see these guys with this, you know, let's go Dutch. I'm like, oh, Jesus, dude, if my son ever did that, I'd be ashamed.
Yeah, it drives me crazy. Like, I'm massive on the masculine, feminine energy. Like, my wife and I talk about this all the time. And I've had friends and acquaintances that have went from masculine energy to feminine energy and they're divorced.
Yeah.
Like, I've seen men try and be like, when I think to myself, and people take this as sexist or not, but like, I look at a man and a woman's relationship and I've seen it firsthand where the man tries to become the motherly kind of parent in a way. And the woman then goes to work and she's just in this massive masculine energy all day to then come home to a man in such a feminine energy. In my personal opinion, in my experience, it's opposite. Like, I tell Jen, which is my wife, and she's amazing, but I could never be with a woman like a lawyer or a doctor. That's like, I couldn't do it. That's just not what I look for.
That's
in
coming
a woman.
home stressed.
Right.
And
that's coming home stressed and
lawyers
masculine
doctors,
energy.
I'm sure they can do it.
Right.
It's
And they
about
can
being
come
able
home.
to shift. It's
Well,
about being
It's
able
that
to
shift,
shift that energy.
Yes.
What she says to me is, you're a fixer, right? She's done my human design, right? She went on a retreat and they learned about human design. She's like, you just want to fix everything all the time.
Yeah.
Right? Rather than listen,
Yeah.
right? Just listen. You don't need to fix my problem or my issue. And I try and fix things. I'm like,
Big mistake, bro.
Right, yeah.
No.
Rather than listening, right? So it's just so interesting when you have that masculine and feminine energy because
Well-
that conversation's true too. Like just in those conversations, it's like this story starts. I'm like, fucking tell me this, and let's work backwards because I'm in the suspension.
You're shocking at this.
I've got a story like
just
that.
tell me anyway.
Like they say, you know, men want to make big things into small things,
Yes.
and women like
Women-
small things into big things.
Yes.
So like, what's your problem? I'll solve it.
Yeah.
Like,
At least
dude,
tell me
just
what
let
we're
me talk.
But let me what are we talking about to start with? Because we're fucking wasting my time.
You guys will love this. Just this morning, we're obviously staying in an Airbnb while we're up here, and Dom's like, she's making eggs, and she's like, oh, I forgot the oil. And I'm like, use the oil from the peanut butter jar. And she's like, I don't want you to fix the problem. I just want you to listen to me. I'm like, I'm a fixer though.
Do you want me to tell you where this? Do you want me to tell you something interesting? So they've actually done a study. They've done a study on I think 100 babies, 50 boys, 50 girls, right, at the age of 1, and they sat them in between. They sat them and had them, facing their mother, right? So a secure, healthy children, and they had a time of connection, like they allowed them to connect and play. And then what they did was they placed an object, like an obstacle, between baby and mother. Every single boy went straight to the object to destroy and move the object, like overcome the object. Every single girl sat and cried. So what does that tell you about masculine and feminine dynamics? Men are naturally, and it's funny, I was just sitting at a cafe this morning, and I was on this cafe, and this huge group of like runners, athletes came and sat. There would have been 40 people there. Some girls, some guys, and this car was pulling up the street, and the car broke down, and I could tell the car had broken down. These guys were all chatting and laughing. It took them a while, and I'm sitting there thinking, oh God, this guy can't start his car. I could tell he was sort of like on this hill, and before you knew it, all these, people looking up. Every single guy got up and went to push the car. The girls didn't. The girls stayed there. So it's like, let's just honor that, And don't get me wrong, there's a great thing that you can ask your partner. Do you need me to fix this or do you want me to just listen? You can actually ask her that.
Yeah.
And she can tell you what she needs.
Great question.
Yeah.
But, at the end of the day, let's just honour that a lot of the problems that have been solved in society are because men are fixers. Women
so
generally...
there's the old saying, like, the nearer we get to death, the more we go back to our natural roles. Like if we're stuck on a deserted island and we need firewood, and that means chopping big logs down, and it's survival, and the kids need tending to, like it's just, and I think the key here is respect though. Like,
of course,
there's got to be mutual respect. So I deeply respect my wife and the way she operates, but she doesn't operate like me. But when I see her, the way she takes care of people, she's a nurturer, she's a mum. And I'm just in awe of how kind, and you guys have seen it, right? Yeah. She takes care of everyone in her orbit and she nurtures them. And that's what I fell in love with was that beautiful feminine flow. Yeah. And what she fell in love was the dude that goes out and hunts and does what he does. And but I think there is a place to have a wife who's a lawyer or whatever. Yeah. As long as when you get out of the role and you go back to your relationship with nothing to do with business. Yeah. I know some female lawyers that you get them out of the law, out of the office, they're just completely different. Like, and that's that ability. And men, you need to, when you come home, realize when you're dealing with your wife, you're not dealing with somebody who works for you. You're not in that hunt and kill mode now. You're in that nurture mode for your supportive connecting mode. Yeah. So we all need to be able to change as well, but not lose our core
energy.
Yeah.
Well, what I find so interesting, right? What makes two people fall in love is emotional connection. So that's heart-centered, right? It's feeling seen, it's feeling heard, it's feeling understood. Like this person gets me. Now, what I often see, women go into criticism, control, or sort of like they go into their head, right? So what happens if I'm in my head and I'm trying to criticize or control you? Where are you going to go? You're going to go straight to your head because you have to defend. So you're unable to connect with me emotionally because you're in your head. So this is why I'm so passionate about this work, because when we teach women, and the problem is so many women are living in their heads. I could ask... How do you feel? How do you feel? How does that make you feel? How are you feeling? and women go straight to their mind. And that's the whole analysis, right? It's like, well, I just think that this shouldn't be happening. Or it's all about the analysis of the situation. The feeling is I feel scared, I feel hurt, I feel angry, I feel sad. And how many women know how to communicate like that? Not many.
And how many men know how to spot it?
Exactly.
And create and hold that space?
Yes, yeah.
And to go, okay, so at the end of that tirade of words,
So true.
how are you feeling?
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Well, we don't understand how to attune to what's being said under what's really being said. So it's never really about the issue, right? It's never really about the dishes. It's never really about taking the bins out.
Never.
It's underneath. So what I think most human beings aren't skilled at is when there is a conflict or misunderstanding, trying to drop in and hear what's really being said underneath the complaint. Okay, this person sounds really scared right now, or this person sounds quite angry. This person's really feeling misunderstood, whatever it is. We keep talking surface level, right? But actually what's deeper, there are usually a few things. Like people are always looking to find, are you going to do you love me? Are you going to respond to my needs? And do you understand me? We're always looking for those things, right? And so really what happens is when we're feeling that disconnect, it's usually one of those fears that's coming up that we don't know how to actually express. And that's why it comes out that it's about something else.
I'm going to admit to it again. I've been watching maths. It's my guilty little pleasure with my wife at the moment. But there is one couple on there, and I can't think of her name. She's got the blonde hair. She's like 43 years old. Don't pretend like you don't see it. I fucking know you watch it. Anyway, I can't think of her name.
Watch it, mate.
No, anyway, I can't remember her name. But she's with this dude who has a lot of issues, but she's just handling it like a champion. She's staying right in her heart, and watching this dude just kept all these fears and rejection and shit. She's just masterfully, emotionally intelligent. Yeah. She's done the work. She's like a weapon at this stuff. And I'm like, this girl should be writing leave. Like, this guy's got serious red flags. Yeah. And she's just patiently it's just such a beautiful skill when people have honed it. And there are people, and I suppose men and women, that are just masters at this. I can see why it works so well.
It's so interesting, right? When my ex and I broke up, and I came to see this was actually evident within me in all my relationships. So think about my wound, right? Rejection. So what he was really saying is, I don't feel accepted by you, right? I didn't accept him for who he was. And this is actually a human need. We need to feel like our safest relationships are those where we really feel accepted by someone, flaws and all. But the thing was, and actually when I started unpacking this, I realized quite a few people didn't feel accepted by me. And actually it was because I didn't accept me. So whatever the relationship is within will be projected without. So she obviously has done so much work to accept, love, build her self-worth within, and that's why it's mirrored outwardly. So whatever you relate within will be out.
Nerida, you do obviously do a lot of work with women, and it sounds like it's amazing work. But what are some tips for men on areas to do the work to help better connect with their partners or women if they're single?
Yeah, such a great question. So the first thing I would encourage men to do
Take
is...
notes, James.
We're recording it, James.
Just give me a business card. Just fucking straight past the floor. Give me the 20.
Another public service announcement. James remains single as of today.
I'm like, fuck, I've got some work to do.
He's taking some applications.
Yes.
Okay, carry on.
Yeah, first thing is understand your own emotions first. Okay, so check in every single day. Like, what are you actually experiencing? What emotions are you going through? And like, you can go through a range of different emotions in one day, and just start to build a relationship with that. Like, don't reject, don't judge yourself, don't, just notice it. Just like a witness, notice those emotions. Like, oh, I'm feeling a bit angry right now. The big emotions I see men struggle with is frustration, anger, and I would say frustration is sort of the big one. So, and that comes from anger, right? So it's unrecognized anger within. Start to just develop a relationship for yours, because then when you start to develop a relationship with your own, you'll start to recognize them when other people project their, emotions towards you. So when a partner is projecting an emotion towards you, or just start observing every time you're with anybody, like, what do I think this person might be feeling right now? They seem pretty relaxed. They seem pretty content. She's excited. She's enthusiastic. She's motivated, inspired, whatever it is. And just start to develop your emotional attunement. That's what that's called. It's just tuning in. Starting to develop that literacy. Yes.
This is great. We should definitely throw this up as well.
Yes. Get the wheel up. Look at that every single day. When I'm with you, when you're with your kids, your nieces and nephews, when you're with your parents, colleagues.
So number one, start noticing your own emotions.
Yeah,
right?
every single day. Then start tuning into other people. Start developing your ability to recognize other people. Then just start to develop safety within the body. So what happens is whenever we go into defensiveness or criticism or contempt, what I tend to notice is there are the 4 horsemen, right? So these 4 things, when they start to come into your relationship, you're doomed. Criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt. Now, women tend to, in my experience, generally, women tend to go into criticism and defensiveness. Men tend to go into contempt and stonewalling. Okay? Generally speaking. Does this resonate?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
This is Gottman, isn't it?
Yeah, Gottman theory. Like they've studied couples for 40 years. You cannot argue with their work. So just notice your tendency. I tend to, and there's a great saying, right? Whatever the growth comes from the opposite of what you normally do. So for me, mine's criticism. So my growth is learning, noticing that criticism and that, need to criticize and just breathe and check in, ask, why am I wanting to make that comment? Why am I thinking that? If stonewalling, like closing down is, you actually need to start to open up more and share more. If contempt is the worst one because it's like, and I see a lot of men struggle with this, right? It's their way of coping, but you put yourself superior and you put your partner inferior. Yeah. And that's really painful, right? Because you think about it, whenever someone is trying to make you feel like you're less than them, there can be no connection. And I see a lot of women end up with men like this because it's the perfect pairing. A man plays out contempt, you have low self-worth, it goes together like.
And it's not even done intentionally as
of
well.
Of course not. It's a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
Of course, this is not meant with any judgment. It's just a coping mechanism from childhood. It's what's kept you safe. So just notice your tendency and start to bring in some vulnerability. Like this one phrase can save so much. When you're starting to feel heightened, just check in and say, hey, I'm noticing I'm starting to get defensive, or I'm noticing I'm starting to feel frustrated. Can I just take a minute? I'm just going to go and breathe. Can we pick back up on this? So what I always say is there'll be an anxious and avoidant in any dynamic that isn't secure. Like if you've got a good relationship, chances are you're probably both more the secure attachment style, whereas if you're noticing ups and downs, I tend to be more anxious. So that's more like nitpicking, needy. It's more like clingy energy, and it's more leaning in and wanting to talk and sort it all out. Avoidance more like retreat, stonewall, close down, and self-soothe, right? Now, in a dynamic, what I see often happens is both people don't get their needs met because it's just this constant like conflict and no resolution. To come up with one phrase, like if you're in that dance, when you have conflict, come up with an agreement. Like, hey, when we have conflict, like if you're anxious, right, you might tend to feel better talking it out and knowing that we're okay. I tend to need more space so that I don't say something I'm going to regret, so I need distance. But we want to both get needs met. So how about we agree to take some time to go and self-soothe, and that's got to be within 24 hours. So it could be an hour, it could be 2 hours, right? Now, you're getting your need met because you know we're going to come back and talk about this. I'm getting my need met because I'm getting time to go and soothe. But what's also beautiful is you're both leaning into the middle. You're having to learn how to self-soothe by being more on your own and sort of self-reflecting. I'm having to stretch a bit by having to come back and talk about it where I'd normally just sweep it under the rug.
This is where relationships blow up.
Yes.
Because you don't have a timeout. Somebody says something that you can't unsay.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's the old saying that words can be, are the most damaging things. They can pop a perfect relationship balloon that's been there. Yeah. They can burst it. It can never recover.
Yes. Yeah.
And I find that for some people listening to this, the older you get, the harder it is sometimes because you're stuck in your ways. And there are men I see that get angry. I was looking down the road at 40 at guys who are single at 50, and there's this anger, and I'm 50, I know better than everybody. I'm like, yeah, but you're alone, dude. You're sitting there on your own, getting drunk, your girlfriend's bloody whatever you do at home. Like there's no real relationship. There's no loving you. Sorry, I'm just scaring you, James. No, I know you're on this journey of self-discovery, self-improvement, but so many men get stuck in their ways. They become, and I've seen women too. The same thing. It gets really hard for them to change as they get older. They get to 40 and 50 and then they start telling themselves all these things instead of actually pausing and going, do I want change? Because I don't know, for me, I personally believe that I agree with the Beatles. All you need is love. And if you don't have love in your life, or you're in a relationship, you can be in a relationship with no love. That is the ultimate goal of everything. I can't imagine life without love.
It's a human need.
It starts by learning to love yourself. I know it's cliche, but everything that you're talking about is about loving and showing empathy for yourself first and foremost.
That's what I was going to say. Step one, I would have thought, is find your own emotional home. Understand that language yourself and what's going on in your life. Like I get triggered now by certain things that I'm learning to deal with. But we all have a childhood. We all have a past. And because it is this work, guys, listening at home, I can tell you if you're sitting here going, well, fuck, this isn't much of a podcast. I just want to learn to make money.
This has been one of my favorite podcasts so far.
But let me tell you, like you can get all the money in the world. You can have $100 million company. But if you don't have love in your life, that's where the young men listening to this, it is, I can honestly say that there's one day I drove to Eric's house with Eric and I pulled up in my Ferrari and Eric was in the passenger seat and his two little girls ran out with Jen and I was choking back tears because in that moment the girls were like, oh my God. And you were like leaning over and say, see girls, this is what you get when you work hard, And I remember turning to Eric and say, you're a very rich man, not about the money, but the richness in that beautiful family unit that you have. All of that is on the other side of learning what Nerida's talking and teaching us today about having a genuine open heart, And I'm going through it with sort of a late adoption of Josh, who's my stepson, but we're becoming closer and closer as I'm dropping my fear of rejection of not being a good enough dad or just not having it in me or people thinking I'm faking it, all sorts of shit that comes up. As I'm like, things like that. And somebody very close to me said, he'll never be your son. You know that, right? And this is and I like, stop pretending, And so we all have this stuff of being found out and imposter syndrome and all this shit that we deal with in our lives. But this is such powerful work because without love, guys, all this podcasting about money, that's where the money is over here with a beautiful wife, Jen, and two beautiful girls and all the rest.
And you're saying about, it's just love's on just the other side of this. Like I want your details. You know what I mean? Like I'm going like, I just want it to be better and better and better. Like if you think you have a great relationship and you're being loved both ways, I'm just going like shit, there's so many aha moments here going, oh my God, that's me. Oh my God. Oh my God. I shouldn't have, oh shit, man. I shouldn't have smashed that window.
You're going to have no room for the women. You're going to be booked out.
Honestly though, this is very taboo, right? It's a very taboo subject, manly man and, you got to go within. Like there's so many things that you've said today. I've been a bit quiet because I'm just listening going, oh my God, like I'm looking at myself in the mirror going, that's me.
I know there's some guys at home going, and girls, they're going to listen to this because this cost me half my net worth. Not knowing this shit and being a stubborn prick.
It's so true.
Instead of creating and holding space for my wife or my partner or in a female's case, I lost a good man. I lost the guy that could have been a great dad to my kids and now I'm 50 and alone and I can't have babies anymore. How fucked up is that? Because
you see that a lot.
You see that a lot. I met a woman at a conference who was sitting there crying when Tony was talking about this stuff and said, I signed up to this stuff about fucking equal this, equal that. And now I'm 50 and I can't have a kid because I never allowed space for a man to be a man. And I never actually allowed me to just surrender into being a woman and allowing a man in.
And it's so common.
It's sad. It was tragic.
Every Tony Robbins event, that story comes up. It's so common.
She said, she got on the mic and said, girls, listen up. Listen to a girl who's missed this. Oh my God, it's tragic.
Yeah. Yeah, that is, and I see it a lot, and I'm living it too. You know, like I'm 41. Like there's so much fear for me. Like, what does my next chapter look like? And yeah, like it's so natural to like I'm facing that too. But you know, I'm also on the other hand so glad that I didn't have kids 5 or 10 years ago because I would have been like a terrible parent. I would have projected all my pain onto my kids. I would have been so disconnected. I would have been so unable to love that child the way that they needed to. So, you know, I sort of do trust that, you know, I trust that everything plays out as it's meant to. And I'm so glad, I'm proud of myself for leaning and doing like such hard, deep work. Like I have sat with myself in so moments of like, such ugliness. And
good for you.
It's the only reason I can sit here with other people now.
Yeah, you can feel it in your energy. It's so clear.
Yeah.
And I believe good things are coming your way. And I think it's beautiful work that you're doing. How do people connect with you, Nerida, if they want to get coached or whatever your programs are? What's the best way to hit you up?
Yeah, so I have an Emotional Intelligence 101 course that you can buy. It's a self-paced course and it's 6 weeks and there's like lessons that you can integrate. It touches a bit on relationships, a bit on parenting, mental health and well-being. I will have some more courses coming out later in the year. And you can also work with me in my group container. So I have a group called the Fem Network where most of these women are female entrepreneurs and really struggling with so much of what we've talked about today. And that's a group program, but you also do get to work with me one-on-one as well. The best way to reach out to me is through Instagram. I love being on Instagram. I hang out there quite a bit. So Nerida Bint, Neridabint. And just send me a DM and reach out and connect and
you know, Nerida, I think you're missing a business opportunity here. I think on the other side of that we should have a database of dudes that want emotionally intelligent, successful women
guarantee you're going to get
prepared to
inundated.
come home and like let a man take care of them and surrender.
Well, I do coach men, but I do more of that one-on-one. So I do coach a lot of men because
men need that
I
attention.
think you're saying a bit more bespoke dating a matching service.
Yes, exactly.
For real, because I've got girlfriends like that. Some of my wife's friends who are still single and they're awesome chicks.
Yeah.
But then, Cass will go, would you date them? I go, hell no, I wouldn't date them.
And why is that?
For everything we talked about,
Yeah,
right? Like,
exactly.
I would definitely date them if they could just put down the armor when they got home and said, look, there can only be one bloke in this relationship and it ain't you, right?
Yes.
Like, when you get home, put your feet up because I'm going to take it. But if you're at work, you're smashing it, mate, I'll be there to support 1,000%.
Yeah.
But and one girl that did figure this out, she said, I just want to rest when I get home into a man. I want to rest into the comfort of being a woman.
Yeah.
And she loves it and it's great. But it is a journey to do that. And blokes do want to do it. We're just like, I don't know what it is. We're just wired that, most of us wired that way.
Yeah, and I think most women want that too.
Yeah.
I ironically think most women, I think we've been brainwashed into this lie of feminism and all this propaganda that's out there that to make us believe like it's further bringing us separate. But I actually deeply believe that most women do want that, but it means, and so many women say, well, where can I find a masculine man? And it's like, well, are you attracted to a feminine man? Because if you're not, right, like a woman's not, a polarity means you're attracted to something opposite than you, right? So women aren't attracted, most women, we're talking like generic here, aren't attracted to something energetically like them. Like you're repelled by a man who's clingy, needy, sort of leaning on you for support, whatever, right? But just like you're repelled by that, men are repelled by you because you will not release control. So instead of asking yourself, where do I find all these masculine men? Ask yourself, am I really in my feminine? Because I promise you what I've seen in my own life, every single man I've dated in the last few years has been more and more towards that masculine leadership energy, the more and more I heal and drop into my feminine and my feelings and my emotion. I've literally seen the progression. It's like crazy to watch. So don't go out there seeking. You become, it will find you.
Do you feel like you can find a masculine man that wears linen regularly?
This is yet another dig at James's fashion choices. That was coming for a while.
Touche.
So guys, as we wind it up here, hit Nerida up on Instagram. And I want to thank again the sponsor of today's podcast, Early Bird AI. This is a company that Eric and I funded because we can't get real sponsors. We sponsor ourselves. But this is nobody's going to put their name on us yet. But no, in all seriousness, Early Bird AI, 2 young guys, one of them was on the pod here, which is how we came up with the idea. But they've got a phenomenal business. If you own a business of any kind, basically if you have a website and you're interacting with the big wide world out there, make a free appointment with them. They'll sit down for half an hour with you for free. They'll do an audit of your business and explain how you can implement AI into your business right now. It is game-changing time to be doing it because this is the time where small businesses can leverage AI and really become big in a way that has never been possible before. They're 2 terrific guys, earlybird.ai, but it's with a Y instead of an I instead of a Y in Earlybird, so EARLI, bird.ai. Go to their website, book in for a free call, and they will do that for you over Zoom. Guys, thanks for watching. Nerida, thank you for being here. It's been an absolute joy. And we'll see all you guys. If you've enjoyed the pod, drop a comment below. Nerida's going to read them. We're going to read them. I'm sure we're going to get savaged on a few points here. We're definitely going to be called sexist or whatever at some point. But let us know what you thought. And women watching this, if you are, or if you know a woman that would be great on this pod, take up some space, please, right? We do want to hear from women who've got value to add. I think it's fair to say you added a lot of value today, particularly in business, Please come in. We want to hear your story. We want a female perspective on things. They're just harder to find for all the reasons that we pointed out today. So let's get about it. So
and men, share this podcast with you women. This has been incredible.
It has been, and parents and so on. Help us grow the thing, guys. We want to get this out there. We want to grow it. Aussie Born and Bred podcast. And it's been great. So thank you all for participating and playing. Thank you, Nerida, for being here.
Thank you,
And
Nerida.
we'll see you all next week. Thank you for tuning in. Bye for now. Hey there. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Unemployable. If you'd like to watch another episode, just click there.